It's been an interesting year, to say the least. The public has gone from one shocker to the next. There were moments of grief, concern, and then the nervous anticipation of what weather patterns might bring. And through it all, one common denominator: the press. The Fourth Estate has one job, and that's to investigate and report what's going on in the country and in the world. Members of the public really rely on us to keep them informed. Tonight, we got an opportunity to give our opinion on the hot topics that have taken place over the year. Our guests, Deandra Williams of JCN, Jared Higgs of the Nassau Guardian, and our very own Megan Shepard here at Our News. Our season closer, Press, the Year in Review. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. We'll see you on the other side of this break. Press Year in Review is our focus tonight. Members of the Fourth Estate are here to share their opinions on major stories that took place over the past year. In this first segment, Jared Higgs from the Nassau Guardian, who is no stranger to us here at Our News. Jared, how are you? Welcome to On the Record.
Thank you so much for having me. Things are going well. Thank you.
What has the year been like for you? We're going to start there. Just as a journalist, it's been we've seen a lot happen, but what has it been like for you?
Well, I would have rejoined news earlier this year, as a matter of fact. When I think about it, I think back in February. It's been a very eventful year. As a reporter, focusing on the crime stories, car accidents and these other types of things. I found that, we've had that uptick in crime. That's been concerning. Bahamians continue to, unfortunately, the way that we use the road continues to be a major issue, causing a lot of consequences. And then, of course, we've had some other stories in between that have, really, really unfortunate things, and revealing revealing things that maybe could be different in our communities.
Now, I know that, as you have said, you focus a lot on crime. Are you noticing anything different in the stories that you're covering? Any new trends, or is it pretty much the same?
It's kind of the same. We see the things like the upward trend in the sense that you're seeing a lot more of these incidents, but of course, as the police and as we point out, and sometimes when you be going follow up these stories, we're finding that, of course, a lot of these young men who are being killed are out on bail. And so that's definitely a major trend this year. People out on bail getting killed, and it provokes this conversation about whether judges should grant bail to murderers, and it kind of like I say, provokes that conversation. But again, what happens is, bail is a constitutional right.
Sure.
People have a right to apply, and really, and I think Wayne Monroe puts it best. He says, if it's up to the defendant to hire his lawyer, to go to court, to represent him, to make the bail application, and these lawyers, they know how to make successful bail applications. So guys are going to continue to get bail because that's ingrained in our Constitution.
That's another conversation. A lot of times when you're covering, these crime scenes, whether it be murder, or whatever, or related serious crime, you're going into areas that are crime areas. You're going into sometimes even hostile, emotional scenes. Are you ever afraid going in?
Not afraid, maybe nervous, on a maybe a little bit nervous, but at the same time, I like to think that when you conduct, I try to conduct myself, I conduct myself professionally, and I think it's a lot about knowing, why are you there, and it's about conveying that to the people who you're trying to talk to, in particular, people who are, victims, or who are relatives of a victim, and because in all fairness, us as journalists, we have an obligation to go out there and gather the facts. That's a unique obligation. It's something that we as journalists do. And we do it in a professional way. And so, I try to keep that at the forefront of my mind. Be professional, balance the sensitivity with the desire to get the information. And I think over time you get more and more and more experience. You just learn more and more of the right things to say and not to say, do and not to do.
Do you ever, or are you getting to the point where sometimes you lose your sensitivity because it's so much of the same? I remember, when we talk about it, I think, in our own environment and here sometimes, when a murder was something that always led the news. You knew what was, you were out the gate with, but now murders are pardon the phrase, but almost a dime a dozen. You're like, okay, so where are we going to put this murder tonight, or how is that going to fall? Does it feel sometimes that we are becoming a bit immune?
I suppose so, because to be honest, Jerome, when I joined news in 2013, murder was normalized. We had very high murder counts for several consecutive years. Normalized, yeah. And so I imagine that earlier on, maybe during the 2000s, early 2000s, when the murder count started to climb, I believe, I wonder, or maybe if you don't mind, if I bounce a question back off of you, I'm guessing that it was a bit more of a new thing then when you started to first see the murder rates increase. But now, right, like where it's become normalized, and so like you say, even following up a going and talking to, it is difficult. It is difficult because so many people are leading particular lives. And I can say this because we have 120 murders. 100 of those guys were on bail. And I've spoken to a few of their families too, and some of their families have acknowledged, had the wrong friends. These things, so
got in trouble. He was a bad boy.
So
he did this,
we know these things exist in our community, and so, it is so normalized, and people as well are, they're wary of, the journalists coming and trying to find out more information too.
You're finding is your job a little harder now with getting people to talk?
It is a little bit. It is. I think that with us using social media so much more, people are seeing, without a doubt, people are, they know kind of what to expect from the news, or what they can expect perhaps. As journalists too, again, like following up a murder is nothing new. This is something that has probably happened since time, right? But now we have, you could post it on social media so quickly. Everybody has a say because you can comment on stories and share them with your comments. And so, members of the public are like well aware of the news content that is shared with them. And so it has made it like, for me personally, I try to be much more, selective about where I go and who I try to talk to.
I think too, sometimes we see the insensitivity of the public play out on social media, because sometimes you're right, just in reading the comments under some of these posts and under the stories, there is not that sympathy or that empathy for the person or even their family sometimes.
Members of the public are very predictable in that sense. The example that stands out the most is there was a young man who was caught on camera robbing a liquor store. And a few weeks later, the police, he was killed by police. His family acknowledged fully that it was him in the video. They they said they were sorry. And then they still pleaded for more answers as to how he was killed. And there really was not, from what I could see, much sympathy from members of the public, and some would say understandably so. Members of the public, many of them have been victims of, say, armed robbery. They're not going to have sympathy for an admitted armed robber. And I say admitted, like, the family admitted it was him.
Yeah.
They're not going to have any sympathy there, right? And so that's one side of it. And again, social media, though, and sometimes I wonder, like, how are we as journalists going to continue to use social media as time goes on? Because I think we can recognize that, we have a part to play. Like, we post the stories. They posted a story yesterday about a 9-year-old boy killed in a collision with a truck. The family has certain concerns about the report that the police put out, and they believe that that the version of events is different than what was described. And so when you put the story out, and me as a journalist, I can't take the family side. I can kind of find a middle ground for them. But the commenters want to put their opinion into it. Shouldn't be riding bikes in the street, shouldn't be doing, but without really knowing all the facts.
Or even having that sympathy or empathy. This year we also saw a new commissioner of police. Your assessment on how he's been doing, has it made a difference in crime?
It's difficult to, I'll start by saying this, I've found Clayton Fernando to be, he and I have had a decent relationship in the past. I have been able to go to him. He's a friendly person. But I do wonder how accessible he is right now to, members of the media. And he's got a big task in front of him because we're seeing rising crime. And, there's been some, there was one day in particular where, he expressed one view on crime, perhaps suggesting that, it was not to say that it was okay. He's not saying that the crime situation is okay, but maybe he said not really anything to be concerned about. Wayne Monroe is saying something different. Maybe I wonder if Mr. Fernando is going to want to, speak out a bit more. What I found from the previous commissioner, Paul Roll, was that he was really accessible to members. I'll speak for myself. He was very accessible to me. If I asked him a question, I got an answer. And he tried to answer. And so, we saw where, and this is my opinion, my view, Paul Roll tried to be accessible to members of the media. Didn't always give us the answers that maybe we wanted or that we thought were appropriate for situations, but was accessible. And I think I would like to see, Mr. Fernando be as accessible.
Do you, and this is again from your experience, do you think, with a commissioner, with a minister of national security, constantly having to answer those questions whenever there's a series of murders concerned about crime, we as journalists, we're going to put those mics in front of their faces and ask them. Do you think the public is getting that reassurance or believes really that the crime situation is in hand?
Well, I think that the police get a lot of pressure to, it's almost as if like murders, if there's a murder, it's like some people seem to think that it's the fault of the police when the real powers in this country lie with our lawmakers who have the most influence. They are the ones who are able to pass laws that dictate how we have to live in society. So I think that lawmakers have long since had a much greater role to play in shaping our country in such a way that we have less people resorting to a life of crime, or less people, I'll leave it at that, less people resorting to a life of crime. I really believe that the government has a lot more that they can do on that in terms of improving education, improving social assistance, but in particular education. And to me, it comes down to pride as a country. how great do we want our public education system to be? Jared Higgs, just a reporter, not the Prime Minister, I can only talk.
Sure.
I'm not a lawmaker. The lawmakers have to take that responsibility.
And I agree with you. I think when individuals commit crime, it is almost at the end of a systemic problem. And whether it be a problem with, as you say, education, your inability to even discuss matters, conflict resolution, to be able to articulate a situation, conflict, socioeconomic. There are so many things, I think, that contribute to the crime problem, and what the police are dealing with are the end result. But you're right, I think lawmakers need to begin to look at how this all begins. Where does it stem from? How does it start? A young man doesn't just wake up today and say, I'm going to commit a crime, or I'm going to lead a life of crime. There are things that happen that get there to that point, but that's another show for another day. Another big story we had this year, a little bit crime related in that a smuggling operation turned deadly when a boat overturned with a number of illegal Haitian immigrants en route to Florida. A number of Haitian nationals died in that. Do you think, first of all, how do you think, in your opinion, how was it handled? And do you think enough of a spotlight is being put on that problem since then? Because I can tell you that's continuing. It continues to happen. That's big business. Human smuggling is huge business. But how, in your opinion, how is it handled, and have we done enough to continue to shine the spotlight on that problem?
I'm not sure if we've done enough to shine the spotlight, but I know that the argument that our government makes and is entitled to make is that, this Haitian migration issue is so much bigger than what the Bahamas can manage. I mean, the issue is in Haiti, and I always say it, Bahamians don't really have a concept of what life is like in Haiti.
Nope.
We all that we see, all we see is there's a lot of Haitians around. There's a lot of, and so which is telling us that they're migrating here. We know this is happening. They're migrating here. We know why they're coming here. And me, I play football. I play soccer. I see these guys. You know what I mean? Like young guys.
Because it is a sport that they, as a country, that they love.
That is,
and they participate
and so like it's how they kind of they mingle in Bahamian society in certain ways, right? So through sports. So I see them, and so it's like you can see these guys are coming. They're, but like sometimes I look at them because I have like close relationships with some Haitian migrants too, and I think to myself, I know this guy has a story. Like he's got I don't know his story. He wouldn't even probably
But he's got one.
He's got a story. Because he came out of Haiti. And I empathize with that. I sympathize, I think. I don't think I can put myself in their shoes and understand, because never been to Haiti, didn't grow up there. But again, I think that, I think that we understate how bad it is there. I mean, it's a very, very, very difficult place it's a difficult place for our Bahamian diplomats to be.
Because it's a problem, you're right, that has gone on for decades. We're just about out of time, so final question. Overall, this government this year celebrated its first year in office. How are things going for this government from your perspective?
I've said that I think, generally speaking, people somewhat content, somewhat difficult. I think that this next year is going to reveal quite a bit. I think one of the criticisms that has landed most squarely on the government is the travel. I think that's probably where Bahamians are most perhaps disinterested in hearing that, because the Prime Minister did give an explanation. He says that travel is necessary to build relationships, to get funding for the country. These things are done in person. That's literally what he said, not on Zoom, in person. We have issues at home too. How much of the travel is needed? That the government's going to have to really decide how much of that travel that they want to do, and how they think that Bahamians are going to respond to it.
It's that little, and we know it from experience, it's that little thing that continues to grow and grow and grow, and if it goes unchecked, it's going to escalate into a very big thing. So I think you're right with that. I think they're going to have to answer some questions or give some justifications. But I like what you said. People aren't interested in hearing about it. The justification, I think, because there are so many issues at home that we think need to be addressed. All right, Jared, unfortunately, we're out of time. But first of all, thank you for coming on and speaking with us. Keep up the great work. You certainly help to keep us informed of what's happening out there. And I have to tell you, you go and get the stories that others are either afraid to go and get or just not interested in getting. So we thank you for your good work and continue to do it. And best of luck to you in the coming year.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, well, we're going to take a break here, and when we return, our Megan Shepard joins us along with Deandra Williamson from JCN. We'll be right back with more On the Record. This is our season closer. Stay with us. You're watching On the Record. Welcome back. As promised, journalists Megan Shepard from our News and JCN's Deandra Williamson are here with us to continue our review of those major stories of the year. Ladies, welcome to On the Record.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Megan, yeah, okay. Welcome to On the Record. Yes, yes. And of course, welcome your first time with us, Deandra. So during this year, it was very significant because we came to the end of a long 2-year journey with COVID-19. We saw the world in many ways return to normal, if that is such a thing. I don't know that we'll ever get to normal or back to where we were, but we're in a new normal, I guess we can say that. One of the most significant things, though, was the relaxing of a lot of the restrictions. So travel restrictions, even the mask mandate came down, and so we're now able to do this and so many other things. Do you think we were playing catch up in many instances? To me, it just seemed like it took really long. Do you think we were late in catching up with the rest of the world, or was it a necessary, cautious road for us to take?
I think we were late in catching up because other countries had already basically opened up. Some countries had dropped the mask mandate. You know, some states in the U.S. you weren't required to wear masks and all that type of thing. So we took a long time to get to that point. And I understand that the government, health officials were being cautious, you know, not to, you know, relax the restrictions because COVID is still out there. All right, you still have to be careful. Mm-hmm. You know, you still want to social distance whenever you can. You still want to sanitize. So I think like certain stuff like sanitization and social distancing, that's going to still be with us. But I'm happy, I'm elated that the mask mandate is lifted. I'm happy with that because, you know, it gets hot wearing those things.
Especially in this climate.
Yes.
It was hyperventilating
Yes,
at some point.
yes.
Megan, from your perspective, you know, do you think people were really fed up and anxious for it to all be done?
Absolutely fed up. Particularly, as you said, travel was open, so we're going to other countries. We're living free, mask-free. The tourists are coming here, they're mask-free in the casinos and the hotels. It's like, okay, just let the entire general public be mask-free at this point.
Yeah, it was tough to travel and then come back home and wear the mask.
Right.
I remember thinking, I'm going to rail against this at some point. Also this year, we, for the first time, had a royal visit. The Queen could no longer do her Jubilee tour, Commonwealth Travels. Instead, she sent the now Prince and Princess of Wales. How did we greet them, in your opinion, as a country? What did you think about the visit here? Do you think people still have that affection for the monarchy that they had years ago?
Well, we did a tremendous job in welcoming the now Prince and Princess of Wales. The Bahamas did a fabulous job. I know that about $600,000 was spent on the royal visit. We treated them like royalty, basically. You know, the royal ball, the regatta, the trips to Grand Bahama and Abaco. So they got the royal treatment. We did good. And I know a lot of people seeing that, you know, the royal visit, they believe, you know, it's time to get away from the monarchy. It's trying to get away from the monarch and become a republic. That has been a lot of debate during that time when they were here because people feel as though, you know, why should the Queen still be head of state? She's dead now. We have a king, I should say, King Charles. Why should he be head of state? We, the Bahamas, we could stand on our own 2 feet and handle our own affairs without having the British or the monarchy or have the final say in our affairs.
Megan, do you think it was just talk that we should be moving towards a republic? Because, for me, it comes in cycles. Whenever they're in the news and we have this discussion, do you think it's talk? Or from your reporting, do you think that government may be seriously considering it?
I think it's a mixed bag of what people want depending on generations. I think more younger people are ready to say we can do this and we should do this, and pushing that move toward being a republic. I think it depends who you ask or what circles you're in. Some people, they like it, they still revere it and like the head of the state. Like,
I'll raise my hand. I'm in that generation.
there you go. It depends who you ask.
No, I also people I'm fascinated by the royals. I admit that. But do you think, though, we understand as a nation what it means to become a republic? It sounds good. Barbados did it. Others did it.
Right.
We like to follow fashion. But do you think we've really, as a people, thought it through?
Not thoroughly. Not thoroughly. No, not thoroughly as yet. Because if it has to be taken to referendum, if that decision is,
we know how we do with referendum.
exactly. So
We have a wonderful track record with those.
I probably won't get the response that we want, or it might not go in the favor that persons are thinking. It might not go in favor of what you want. So or otherwise. So. What more has to be done in terms of doing research on how will we go forward without having the king as head of state?
All right, so something a little closer to home that a lot of people agree on, the Village Road debacle, I call it. It has been the subject of even ridicule during what seems to be this never-ending road works on this stretch of road. Megan, from your reporting, is this poor management? What is it you think? And what's the way out at this point? Is there a way out?
As the resident Grand Bahamian, I am scared to talk about Nassau roads. But being
You've experienced Nassau
for less
roads.
than a year.
I just want to tell the story. I think when Megan first moved here, I think one of our very first conversations was the road and the traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure the full history of the Village Road works, but I am ready for it to be done. I think it's been happening for quite a long time. And then speaking to officials from Works, trying to streamline that process when the road is patched, not having a utility company come and dig it back up. So I agree that in terms of, I guess, maybe poor management or organization, having everyone on the same timeline, we're gonna dig it up once, everyone come and fix what you need to fix, let's pave it, leave it, let's have presentable roads.
History will show that roadworks can become an Achilles heel for the government.
Yes.
You need only ask Hubert Ingram, on a former administration, how that turned out for him. But do you think that the road situation, and I've seen just, the roads, and Village Road is just one road, and I do know that the Ministry of Works is planning to do quite a bit of extensive road works. But is this road work issue, you think, in danger of becoming a bigger issue for the government?
Yes, I believe so, because the Village Road roadworks, that has been delayed so much in terms of completion. We're hearing now that it's supposed to be completed by the end of this month, December. And then the press secretary said earlier that December 12th, which isn't realistic based on what you see. You try to avoid that area.
Unless there's a Christmas miracle, I don't see
that won't happen. So yes, it is a problem, going forward with more roadworks, because a lot of roads need repair around town. You see a lot of potholes in some areas, and they're not getting the attention right away that they need. Okay, sometimes potholes will be there for months before the Ministry of Works will come and fix it. So it is an issue, that's ongoing in this country, and I think more has to be done in regard to fixing our roads and getting things done and trying to plan better so that you would avoid the pitfall like what you're experiencing with the Village Road project. Because I heard about that project starting, they was talking about it for a long time. Not officially started, but completing it. It's
just driving down that road. It's just so horrifying to me, because it's like I look at it and you can see the amount of work that still needs to be done.
Exactly.
I say this to our Grand Bahama staff all the time that we are so Nassau centric, but this year we had several islands prominent in the news, and not always in a good way, one of them being Exuma. One of the biggest issues in Exuma this year was the oil spill and what that meant. I mean, when you're talking about an oil spill in Exuma, that's known for its pristine waters, and it's a sanctuary for marine life, and now you have this huge oil spill. What was the potential of that as you saw it, or what was reporting that like for you?
Well, basically, I'm technically the editor for the Bahama Journal. Okay, so I follow the news now because our paper isn't in circulation. So what I've seen based on following the news and all that type of thing, that the oil situation, to me, that's an environmental crime. Okay, and I believe the person who's responsible need to be held accountable, need to be fined, need to get their penalties, because it can happen again. All right, what are we doing to prevent these things from happening? When those ships go into Exuma, on any other island, I should say.
Any island, yeah.
It doesn't have to just be Exuma. Other islands are vulnerable as well, because they have to get oil as well. So what are we doing to prevent this from happening again? Okay, is the government putting in legislation to say that when you bring oil, you have to do this, you have to do that? So more has to be done, because it's a lesson that we can learn from. So in order to prevent this from happening again.
From a family island perspective, Megan, I think she raises a very good point, just about protecting the environment. We're always reacting, it seems, and not doing enough to protect. Do you think that's the case?
I totally agree that more should be done to protect the preventative measures so that it doesn't happen again. In that case, I think it was handled fairly well. I think it happened, luckily, in a spot where the oil was able to be contained. I think that helped them to really, because we went there 10 days after, and it was pretty much clean, and they still had it cleared off. And our Marlena Leonard was there, and she talked about the smell. When I went there 10 days later, thankfully it wasn't as bad. So I think with that, I guess we got lucky of where it happened. They were able to contain it. But again, it should not be happening at all.
Also, Exuma captured international headlines this year with the carbon monoxide poisoning of 3 guests, and really cast a negative light on the property, on the island, even on the country. Do you think we got a black eye in that respect in dealing with that story?
Well, the international media covered it, and from those tourists, they were from Erie, Pennsylvania, Lake Erie, Pennsylvania, and I saw some stories in regard to that. And I think even though that happened, Sandals probably took a hit, probably in the number of visitors that came after probably wasn't as high as they expected. But people love the Bahamas. And despite, you might have 3 persons die, despite that happened, I don't think that would deter people from coming to the Bahamas. Now, they probably won't stay at Sandals, but there are other hotels on Exuma that they can stay to, and throughout the Family Islands and in Nassau. So that really, it was bad for us. It wasn't good. It's a bad look. But I don't think it would stop people from visiting our country. Because I also noticed, too, that Sandals took measures since that to implement carbon monoxide detectors in all their rooms.
I agree with you. We're almost out of time in this segment, but I'm going to steal a little time. Another big family island story. After a great regatta, we had a plane crash in Long Island, killing a mother, leaving a father without a fiance and a child without a mother. When stories like that happen, it causes us all to step back for a moment, because we use planes to traverse these islands, and we're all on a plane going somewhere all the time. What was that like, our coverage of that for you, Megan, in that period?
I remember that, and hearing that she was a young mother that died, and hearing the stories of the other passengers on the plane that really tried to help them. I think things like that really bring back the humane side of what we do. I know, I think you talked about in the earlier segment, you almost get desensitized, but things like that always snap you back to reality. Like I said, we travel these islands, we travel for work, to go back home and visit family. I wouldn't want to say it stays with you and it makes you fearful of flying, but it always brings that reality check back to what we do. And I remember covering that, and that one was always a tough one, especially with young parents in general.
Yeah, you're quite right. So another story that captured the attention of the world, and certainly the Bahamas this year as well. The Bahamas and the world mourned the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. It was a global event. What, in your opinion, do you think that and this now means for us to have a new king, new head of the Commonwealth, new sovereign for us in many instances. I know we touched on it, but what does that all mean for us now? We've got a king who none of us have seen in our lifetime. This is so new for all. We've all known the queen,
yes.
and now we have the king.
Well, I'm hoping to see how he's going to handle his office. How he's going to be, how his behavior
I don't
is
think
going
he's
to be.
as popular. I think
No.
that's the first problem.
Yeah, he's not popular.
He's not popular at
The
all.
situation is
Nobody cares. No,
his marriage to Camilla and all that
Yeah,
kind
I
of
was gonna-
thing.
yeah, the Camilla
it's
thing,
like, I'll sit back and wait to see how he's going to
Yes.
respond to his role.
I love
and how-
Diana. I still hold on
Yes,
to my love for
yes,
Diana. That's
yes.
part of the problem, I think. But you're right. He has been waiting his entire life for this job. You know, Megan. You know, what do you see? And also, too, how do you think, even for your generation, how do you think a new king is being received?
Honestly, again, based on social media, the younger generation, it's just
I really don't care.
trying to find a nice way
It's
to
whatever.
say it. Right. Honestly, we're just so used to the queen. Now
Right.
it's like, who's this guy? And then I guess the older generation before us, they're not too favorable on him anyway. So it's extra like, okay, we'll see. Wait and see, basically.
It's a wait and see situation. But I will say this, though. I think for a lot of people witnessing the death and the funeral of the Queen and the monarchy, I think that was an experience for us. Just watching how all of that played out and how the world watched. Did you find it interesting that a lot of Bahamians were so in tune to it?
Yes. I actually stayed up late to watch it myself.
One thing about us, we like fanfare. No matter what the occasion is, we're going to tune in and to see the tradition, the rich tradition. I like things like that with the rich tradition. So
Yeah, most
I definitely paid
definitely.
attention.
Definitely. So we're going to take a quick break here. We've got a pause. We've got one more segment. We're talking to members of the Fourth Estate. I have to tell you, this is one of my favorite shows of the year. So I'm looking to have more on this. And after this, quick break. And welcome back. Our topic is Press Year in Review. Our guests from the Fourth Estate, Megan Shepherd and Deandra Williamson. Let's get back to our discussion. We had some very strange weather this year. Not that it's new. I mean, we all, I think most right-thinking people recognize that global warming is in full effect. We had the floods and the storms, including some damage from the tropical storms, particularly here in western New Providence. Megan, I know you know full well the effects of a hurricane, having worked and lived through Dorian. There were a lot of folks who were anxious this year.
Definitely.
You being one of them. I know we had this discussion. What was it like for you? You know, we're done with the hurricane season, but what was it like, you know, having this weather approaching and the possibility of us going into a hurricane, you know?
Always great to be out of hurricane season, first of all. And secondly, thinking about weather, you can't help sometimes to go back to Dorian and think about what it did and how quickly it happened. And so even though the weather report could be saying a tropical storm, a hurricane category 1 or 2, Dorian escalated so quickly. So I think out of an abundance of cautions, particularly Grand Bahamians and Abaconians, we used to be last minute people. I don't think so anymore. It's prepare, prepare, prepare. So when I went out and I spoke to people, how are you preparing? Well, I was already prepared from January. So I think that's a good thing, a good learning lesson. People, they just get the 1 or 2 things now as something approaches. But I think hopefully we're being more prepared and taking things more seriously.
I really have to say that I was pleased with the level of preparation that I saw. Even Nasuvians, I thought, you know, were a little more cautious than usual in the preparations, and so That was encouraging. Deandra, Western New Providence. I mean, we had a tropical storm and we had cars being pushed out of the way and there was storm surge, roads closed. That was very concerning. Just a tropical storm.
Yes, it was. It sparked a lot of concern among residents and people. Like you said, in New Providence, they took it seriously because, you know, it started off as a tropical storm, Nicole, and then it turned in when it got over Grand Bahama to Category 1 hurricane. So I think now, since Dorian, Bahamians aren't taking no chances with nothing. And Nicole is also a sign of climate injustice.
Yes.
And because what's going on now in the world of climate change and all that type of thing, because the Prime Minister was at COP27 when Nicole passed, and that's the UN Climate Change Conference. And he was able to voice his concern that, hey, look, we need help, we need assistance, we need financial assistance in terms of the situation.
We need responsible behavior too.
Yes, and responsible behavior, yeah, because countries that are huge carbon emitters, like the United States and China and those other ones, they contribute heavily to this climate crisis. And yet then small island development states like the Bahamas and other Caribbean countries and other small states around the world, we're suffering. We're the one, you know, experiencing the floods and the hurricanes and all this other thing, and they're not even paying attention. We're the most affected. And I appreciate the fact that after COP ended, that there was an announcement of a loss and damage fund. Because the Prime Minister, he mentioned about that. And I'm happy that, you know, COP now sees or is making a huge step in the fight against climate and response to making sure we get climate justice.
I really have to say that I'm very proud of the stance the Prime Minister is taking and how he is really championing this message globally, and he's recognized for that. I
Yes,
think,
he is.
you know, that's a really positive thing for us.
It's very, yeah, it is, because I mean, he's raising his voice for this region. In addition to Barbados Prime Minister, they're the ones you really pay attention to at these international meetings, you know, because they are the ones who are speaking up for the smaller states, small countries like the Bahamas and other Caribbean countries. We are suffering, you know, after storms. And think about it, storms always cause damage, no matter what it is, no matter how small that storm is, no matter how large that storm is. Some damage is going to occur, and we need to know how we're going to go forward in funding these things. And it would be helpful or welcome if you see those developed nations who are contributing to this situation take responsibility and be held accountable as well for what they have done.
If we want to know the cost, just look at our national debt. I mean, it was so
Yes,
interesting
yes.
for them to be able to now monetize what hurricanes have cost us over the years
Yes.
and have contributed to our national debt, you know, which we're having to pay for. One of the things that the government came under fire for was the destruction of the domes in Abaco, which were set up again after Dorian to provide temporary housing. Do you think that was handled right? Could it have been done differently? What went wrong there?
I think it should have been handled differently. I don't think they needed to be destroyed.
That was a bad look.
It
Yeah.
was
It
terrible.
was
a bad
It was.
look.
They should not have been destroyed. I don't think they should have been moved right then and there. I think a couple of weeks after the tropical storm Nicole was impending, and it's like, where are these people going to live? Because I've been there several times since the hurricane, and housing is such a problem. People don't have places to live. They can't have teachers or medical professionals because they don't have places to live. Why destroy homes? That's something, like, just hearing the stories from people just begging and pleading. I just want somewhere safe to lay my head.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
that
I
one
think that
was really hit
that
home
was
for
that
me.
was ill thought through, and really the optics of it were so bad. I mean, just the pictures of the domes being destroyed.
Yes, it was not the right decision, because to me, even though the government is saying, well, the domes were poorly constructed and they have problems and this and that, that was a part of the response from Dorian. And Dorian is a story that's going to be told generations to come. And even if you keep those domes, there for a period of time, or let's preserve them as a part of the history of Dorian.
Yeah.
Whereas I think it could have been thought through to the point whereby they would say, well, let's make it a tourist attraction. So when persons go to Grand Bahama it's Abaco, it's in Abaco, sorry, Dome City is in Abaco. When they go to Abaco, they won't just be able to hear the story of Dorian or visit the monuments or whatever, but they would see that these domes were here. And they housed the persons who lost their homes during the time.
What I think is so unfortunate, and we're going to move on right now, is that in the cleanup, Nobody stopped to think for a moment. Let us keep some of these things in place as
Yes.
monuments.
Monuments.
Like for me, that there was that huge steel hulled vessel that sat in Marsh Harbor. That I thought, why don't they make this a lasting monument to what Dorian did to move a boat that size to the middle of Abaco, and so many other things that were just carted away. You know, again, me and my love of history. Anyway, moving along. The Grand Bahama deal, Megan, this is coming to you now, was on again, now off again. Consecutive governments have tried to sell off the hotel to no avail.
Yes.
That was a huge disappointment.
It was.
Your Grand Bahama. What was-
Another huge disappointment for Grand Bahama. I think I speak for all of us when I say we've heard enough about it. We'd like to see something in black and white be done with the Grand Lucayan. It was another blow, and I remember I went there and I covered it. I was optimistic. I think we always get optimistic, and I know politicians always say cautiously optimistic, but we just want something good to happen for Grand Bahama and for the Grand Lucayan so bad. You can't help but to have that hope, and then when it falls through, it's just another disappointment. Let's just have something happen at this point.
Do you think, is there a solution? I mean, is there a temporary solution? Do you think, you know, from where you sit, I mean, there's so many questions, but is there a solution?
There can be a solution, but the last thing I heard, the Deputy Prime Minister was saying that they don't want to say who the next buyer is going to be until the deal is official, is final. So I think there has to be a solution, because the Grand Lucayan is going to provide jobs for Bahamians in Grand Bahama to get that economy back where it needs to be. So there has to be some solution. Something else has to be done in terms of the sale, because I have this big hotel sitting here doing nothing.
Has
The
to be
concern
what
is
Yes.
it's deteriorating.
It
I
is.
know with each day that passes, it's deteriorating, and you know the worry is it's going to end up like the former Bahamas Princess.
Or the Casa Bahama, or
Casa
the
Bahama, I
Xanadu,
know
or
Bahamas
all of the derelict buildings
Yeah.
on Grand Bahama. It's too many buildings just deteriorating and just going downhill.
Yeah,
honestly.
I think there needs to be even a greater sense of urgency. There are those who say that the deal, you know, any deal has to be tied to a new airport.
Correct. Yeah, definitely in need of a new airport. I see they've been doing some renovations there, but it's still not enough. It's probably barely the size. It's not the size of the domestic airport here.
Yeah.
Much less what's supposed to be our international welcome to the Grand Bahama Island. Something needs to be done. And we have no, well, I shouldn't say we don't have no private airport, but that also leaves a lot to be desired.
And then
As
the U.S.
well.
pre-clearance issue, eh?
Yes, and they want to come back when we have a new airport. So it's just another
So you've lost
layer.
your U.S. pre-clearance, which I know is a great anxiety for a lot of Grand Bahamians.
So it's just another layer of obstacles that Grand Bahama needs to quickly overcome.
Minimum wage increase. The Davis administration sees this as one of their crowning glories. Some merchants say they cannot afford it, yet it is celebrated by many who make minimum wage. Your thoughts?
Well, to me, that was a great accomplishment from the PLP government to increase minimum wage to $260. Although you might say that's not much, but that's something. And then you have
There were people who were not making that.
exactly. So, but then even though now we have inflation, those type of things, people say that's not enough to help with their bills and to buy things. But I think it's been something that was needed for a long time to finally have it, and for government to fulfill its promise of I'm increasing minimum wage and finally give you that. It should be celebrated. And then you have the store owners who are saying, well, we can't afford it because the cost of importing stuff, duty has gone up, things like that. We can't afford to pay these people this minimum wage. So it hurts in that regard, but I hope our businesses would find a way to be able to compensate persons with that.
Do you think we need to give or government should give some consideration to lowering some taxes now that affect businesses? A lot of businesses really, if you talk to them, are living, month to month, and they're barely surviving. Do you think there needs to be some austerity on the side of government?
I think so. It's like a catch-22. It's good for the employees, but like you said, the employers are struggling. So it's a catch-22. It's a good thing, but it still has its drawback. And I do agree that there should be some concessions. That way you don't have the businesses laying off persons who already needed the increase.
So, you're right, and there is that danger that, they may say, well, I cannot afford these 5 employees or these 10 employees, so I'm going to let 1 or 2 go to be able to meet that minimum wage increase. The FTX saga. Did we drop the ball here in the Bahamas? Is this a stain and a black eye for our country?
Yes, it is. We dropped the ball. And it's not making the Bahamas look good on the international field, on the international level to the world. More should have been done in terms of figuring out the background of this young man, Sam Bankman-Fried, in his intentions actually to come here and set up business. Because what has happened now, he's filed for bankruptcy, all this type of thing going on, liquidation, this and that. It doesn't spell well for our country. Even though the Attorney General, Ryan Pinder, he gave an address and saying that, it won't affect the Bahamas, but I think it is because the international media is following us, and I don't like certain things I've seen and I've heard how they're reporting on us, because I saw something in the Wall Street Journal on a video that was circulating that, we're a jurisdiction with no laws like that in place. It's not unregulated, and things like that. It doesn't make us
Which
look
aren't
like
true.
Which exactly is not true.
Blatantly
So
untrue.
it makes it because they were trying to build a case as to why he chose the Bahamas to
Yes.
come, and their story don't always be right.
Yeah.
Because we're here reporting it, we know what's going on. Yeah.
Hard to believe that American journalism could be wrong. Megan, what is it? This has really been a debacle for us.
I totally agree. It is definitely a black eye. It is a stain. It is not a good thing. And could have been handled better. There's still time, I'm hoping, to play catch up and handle it better and just move forward more carefully.
How has, in your opinion, both of you, government has been in office over a year now. This administration has been in. What do you think are some of the highlights, and what do you think are some of the pitfalls that they've experienced in the year plus in being in office?
Well, I don't like to take sides with government. Okay, that's just me as a journalist. Period.
That's not our job.
Yeah, I know, but
for sure. But how do you think? What are some of the things that you think went right?
For me as a journalist, I like the communication. I think Jared mentioned that early. The accessibility, the updates in the communication.
Yeah, there's a lot more that you get.
Yes.
Yeah, I personally, the cabinet updates,
The press briefing.
the press briefings, I think are very necessary and a very, very good thing.
Yes,
So I really want to applaud them on being able to have that communication and having having a colleague of ours who's running that now, I think has really helped to bring that change.
Well, that's good. Yeah, the government is doing a good job, and there is always room for improvement. Some ministers are trying to make strides and make advancements and changes in their ministry, and you could see things like that, like Jobette Colby Davis. She's doing a lot with housing and all that type of thing. So they're doing a lot, but more can be done. The Prime Minister, he's making himself available. He's cool. He's one of those cool prime ministers when it comes to talking, to him as a journalist. So I've noticed all of that with him, and then so it's been good so far. So far, so good.
Yeah.
I think the PLP government is doing a great job.
I think too that what I've noticed, the temperature of the country has come down tremendously. I think people are not as angry and agitated as they were. Prior to all of this, and I think that is one of the things that I've noticed.
Yes, I must give this new administration kudos for opening the country back up.
Yes,
I must say that because Bahamians were frustrated.
Yeah.
And I think if the former administration was still in, we would still be on lockdown, still wearing masks, all that type of thing. So I must say the government has done a lot in regard to putting national events back on stage. We had like a pre-independence thing this year. That was good.
Yeah.
So I look forward to what's going to happen next year.
I think it's a great program.
Yes.
I congratulate.
Yes.
The
Leslie,
government. Yeah, that's my good friend. I can congratulate her. She don't return my calls, so she's listening.
Yes, she's doing an amazing job in planning the events for the 50th anniversary. And then we're going to have John Canoe later this year. So for the
Things are
past couple of
happening.
years, we had no jungle. We didn't see
Yeah,
that. So
we're getting ready to kick
we're
that
getting
off
we're
again.
getting back in motion.
Yes,
Feel
as I
like
said,
Bohemians. We feel like
normal
something
and
is
a new
happening.
normal.
In a new
Yes,
way.
And a new
yes,
normal.
yes.
What are you looking forward to most in the coming year? What are you hoping, to see happen in the country? I know that we've got some major issues. Crime continues to be a serious stain on our country as we continue to even face, rising costs and inflation. There is talk of a recession. So from an economic perspective, there's still a lot of worry. So what are you hoping to see? I'm going to ask each of you, what are you hoping to see, or what are your aspirations for this year that you'd like to see happen in country? We cover a lot of the bad, and we never get to talk about the things that we want to see for our country. So Sandra, I'll start.
Okay, I want to see more empowerment for young people, more
Yes.
programs implemented, because I think not much is being done. Some things are doing done. They're trying to get young people back to work with the 52 workers program and this and
Right.
that. But more has to be done to shape the future generation of the Bahamas, and things can be done to assist in that area. And also to, UN has the Sustainable Development Goals that all countries must meet
Yes.
by 2030, and we have to do more work in that regard.
Agreed.
In terms of climate change, environmental issues, equality, gender equality, things like that.
Well, gender equality is not on the show. But thank you for that. Megan, very
Yes.
quickly, your weekend producer, who I share with you, is telling me we're out of time.
Okay, so I know you said for the country, but my heart will always be with Grand Bahama. I
Yes.
want to see more happen for Grand Bahama so badly, which ties back to the economy. I need to see that flourishing. And then I think that will extend into like an octopus, and other things will get better once the economy gets better. And you mentioned crime, hopefully that will go down. Hopefully I said that fast enough to make time, but always my heart is with Grand Bahama. I just want good things for Grand Bahama.
Most definitely, we do share that love. All right. Ladies, thank you very much. Thank you for the great work that you do in this profession. You certainly continue to make us proud, and thank you so much. Megan is coming up on her first anniversary with us here at our news, so she's
And I love it
doing a
here.
great job.
Thank you.
And we're always happy to have her. She harasses me a lot. I just
My
have to
pleasure.
So again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Also, a special thanks to my earlier guest, Jared Higgs. That's a wrap for On the Record for 2022. We return to the air in 2023 with more topics that directly affect you. Until then, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Above all things, be safe out there. We want to see you all in the new year. I'm Jerome Sawyer. So long.